Let me ask you guys: would you eat cloned meat?
No.
You probably are. This is how crazy things have gotten in this country. The story's from 10 years ago, just about 10 years ago. Alex Jones came on Timcast IRL, and it's fascinating to listen to this guy because he says things, and you're sitting there thinking, this guy's out of his mind. He's sitting here being like, we're having a conversation, and he abruptly goes, well, now you got all these people eating cloned beef. They're eating animals. They're cloning animals. We're eating them. And I'm like, Alex, stop. No, we're not. And he goes, wait, what? Google it. And I Googled it, and from phys.org, are you eating cloned meat? The answer is probably. The FDA cleared in 2008 cloned beef to be consumed. We don't track for it. And so there are a lot of producers that find desirable traits within cows. Look at the popularity of Wagyu. What do you want to go through the arduous process of certified Wagyu A7 Japanese? Sure, if you're in Japan. But what if you're doing Brazilian Wagyu or whatever? You take a sample of the animal and you clone it a bunch of times, and now you've got meat to sell. So this actually is, we don't know for sure how much cloned meat we're actually eating. You probably are eating it without realizing it. The things that have happened in, I can't remember what documentary it was, where it showed how they made common beef for fast food, and they take like 20% of the beef that's pulverized into a pulp, mix it with cleaners and like ammonia to sterilize it, and then mix it back in as a filler to the existing beef.
I think this was the supersize.
Was that supersize meat?
Yeah.
There's things like that we don't realize in our food, and they can claim all of it is still beef.
Yeah. So that's another problem is, again, it gets back to truth in labeling. And that's the combination of USDA and FDA kind of allowing these things to get through and giving allowance to the big producers. I love the whole messaging of Kelly and Casey Means that the tobacco industry, when it got its haircut, turned and moved a lot of their investments, that we're talking about R.J. Reynolds, into big food. And that the case is made by the Means, and I think it's pretty persuasive, that the same business model applies, that we are being hooked on food by processing food so that it has these characteristics that are really addictive for us in terms of our palate and our brain response, like you were talking about the emulsifiers, fats, sugars. These things just go into our little monkey brain and say, this is the stuff you want. And they have made a business that is entirely parallel to the business model of tobacco, of getting you hooked on the product. But they've transformed the whole large food industry into using that same business model.
Y'all know, you know the story of sucralose? You guys know what that is?
Yeah.
Artificial sweetener?
Yeah.
I think most people would be surprised to find out that the artificial sweetener packet they like to put in their coffee was discovered when I believe it was a researcher, was trying to make a pesticide by combining chlorine with sugar to kill insects, and misunderstood his professor, who said, test it. And he thought he said, taste it. So he did and said, tastes good. And they were like, really? The intention was pesticide. I think it was bonding chlorine with sugar. And now we have a widely available alternative sweetener, they call it, which is, it's always strange to me that clearly there's questions about whether that will be safe for human consumption, and they say, don't worry, it is. And I'm like, maybe you just don't.
There's the assumption of safety.
This
right?
is is analogous to the origin of glyphosate we were talking about a minute ago, where it was a pipe
industrial pipe cleaner. It draws the rust and stuff out.
And it's antibiotic, right? I think
it is an antibiotic.
Yeah.
It kills everything inside.
And they found that the areas around where they're using it for cleaning the pipes had no weeds, and they said, "Oh, we got a new indication."
I want to get to the. I want to talk just because there's a very interesting conversation. I think your audience is capable of understanding it, and it's something that was new to me. And Whitney Webb actually went after a guy named Jim O'Neill, who I met. I'm not going to vouch for the guy, but I did have a very interesting conversation, and she was really upset with this perspective he has, which is getting rid of efficacy inside of the FDA. I think it's a very, very interesting conversation, though. And when he explained it to me, and I'd be curious where you're at, Dr. Dr. Malone. But what he said is, do you know that the FDA's original mandate was just for safety and purity? It was only designed to say what's in this bottle is what's written on this label, and is it safe? That's all it was there to do. Years into it, the pharmaceutical industry said, we think that you should be involved in efficacy. You have to determine what the thing does. Can it do what it says it does? And so they did. They got involved, and that was the beginning, sort of the $100 million randomized control trials. Now you have the big expense to get a product out there to be able to say, oh, it cures cancer, it does this. Only the pharmaceutical industry can afford it. That's where vitamins can't make any claim. Nobody else can make a claim. And that's where the FDA took over the industry. And if you think about it, if it's involved in efficacy, it immediately becomes a marketing arm for the product developer. If it says this works, or this vaccine works, or this cancer drug works, now the FDA is actually advertising it to the public. If this is the types of things that we should be looking at, what if we went back to the mandate? All FDA is responsible for is it safe? Prove your product is safe for human consumption or however it's being used, and that what's in the bottle is what it says it is, and let the market decide whether this thing works or not, whether it does what it says it does. I'm going to go to the doctor that's having better results in cancer, and he may be using ivermectin and, fenbendazole or whatever it is. Does the FDA need to be involved in that process? We get, as consumers, to decide whether we think something's efficacious. If we went back there, now a vitamin can make the same claims that a drug is making, and you decide whether it's working for you or not. The society starts to decide, or the doctors you're going to decide. It would totally change the way our system works right now, and I think it's a very interesting conversation.
I want, real quick, just a citation, because I see a lot of people are contesting what I just said about sucralose, and I am correct. You are wrong. Some people are saying it's saccharin. Tim's story is BS. Here you go. I pulled it up. Sucralose, often marketed as Splenda, is an artificial sweetener that tastes similar to sugar but with 0 calories. Its discovery is famously attributed to the researcher misinterpreting test as taste. The story goes that during research on sucrose derivatives, scientist Shashikant Fadnis misheard the command to test a chlorinated sugar compound as taste it, leading to the accidental discovery of its sweetness. That is sucralose, not saccharin, sucralose. Splenda, a.k.a.
So to Dell's thread about changing the structure, the underpinnings of the mission that FDA has, you're accurate in referring to kind of the history and the growth of FDA. But as happens with all these agencies, once you establish a federal mandate, it tends to get grown. Mm-hmm. And that's what's happened, is this kind of mission creep that occurs in agency after agency. And I think there's a lot of merit to the idea of pulling FDA back. I think there's another thing, too, that's important to understand. People don't process. How does FDA get its power? Because for those of us that are constitutionalists, the Constitution does not allocate the regulation of medicine or medical products or medical practice to the federal government. Therefore, it vests to the states. So how does the FDA justify its position? It's all grounded on interstate commerce. Because the Constitution vests the right to regulate interstate commerce to the federal government, that is the crack that has allowed the FDA to slip in. And also USDA, which is why you have these situations like the Amish farmers, notably in Pennsylvania, that are producing raw milk or beef or whatever, and they can't transport it across state lines. That's because of the Interstate Commerce Clause, and that's what allows the feds to come in. I think we got to really look at this kind of transformation that has occurred in a gradualistic way across all of these agencies. The CDC should not be telling physicians, let alone states, what they should practice, how they should practice, what they should do. They don't have the right to do that. CDC is not even chartered. CDC is it's one of these agencies that was never authorized by Congress. And it could be eliminated basically with a stroke of the pen by Donald Trump if he wanted to, just like USAID.
Where's the red line in these artificial dyes are really bad for everybody, and parents don't realize that Red 40, they don't realize, what is that? It comes from a little bug they mash up. It's got like an aluminum compound in it or something. Or tartrazine, which Robert was talking about quite a bit, a coal tar derivative that turns things yellow. we want the government to ban these things, right? Or you know,
I think there's two ways to go, right? Do we treat it like cigarettes? You have this whole the grass that generally recognized as safe. So these new chemicals come out. Now, vitamins fall under that too, which I wasn't really paying attention to recently. Like generally recognized as safe, these compounds that are in a vitamin C or whatever. We don't have to have every single vitamin C company prove that it's safe, so that you see a basis for generally recognized as safe. But a brand new chemical like a dye comes on the market, and the FDA is just looking the other way and saying, we're going to give you a grass, that's generally recognized as safe. So it's going into food, and now you have to have enough people poisoned by it. Someone's got to figure out funding, because now you're in a post-marketing space. Who's doing that post-marketing research? Who can fund it? And then you got to try and win a lawsuit against a Kellogg's or a giant company. And so that isn't working, right? I think so. Either we've got to put more energy into, you have to prove this thing is safe before we put it into our food, which means that's what we thought the FDA was doing. Or if you're not going to do that, then there should be a warning label. This product was never tested for human consumption, and there are studies that show that it's an endocrine disruptor and can cause cancer. Eat at your own risk.
I mean, I suppose there's the libertarian view of choose what you eat, right? I try to eat healthier. We have farm fresh eggs from the chickens, but most people can't afford to live that way. They go to the grocery store and they grab a box of processed grains, and they've got a whole bunch of crazy preservatives in it. That sickens society. And then my concern is a developmentally stunted, diseased population will vote for its own destruction, because it's not. It's a gangrenous function of the body politic, essentially.
But it will vote because it's stuck on a television that is owned by the people making the poison that they're eating every day.
Well, just even outside of that, if you took 100 people and had them build a society, and then one day introduced a food substance that they were all consuming with a rate of 7% genetic degradation per generation, eventually they are dysfunctional, decrepit, unable to reproduce,
sick.
Yeah,
sick. There's this. I don't know if you've ever. You guys have probably heard the studies they've done on cats and the meat consumption, raw versus cooked and dairy. They had 3 generations of cats, and there's numerous studies that have followed this. They one family of cats were given only raw meats, one was given only cooked meats, and one was given only dairy products. The cooked meat family, within a few generations, started losing their hair, becoming sickly, eventually lost the ability to reproduce. The raw meats flourished and had way too many babies, and the dairy was somewhere in the middle. So you look at something as simple as obligate carnivores like cats, then apply that to the human population, where we have poisons in our food that don't immediately kill you, but slowly over time do. Cats losing their hair, coughing, gagging, and not reproducing is obvious, but what happens when the brain is damaged, even a small percentage over a long period of time? These individuals who continually eat these products thinking it's safe are going to get more and more damaged, meaning their ability to self-regulate will be harmed. And then those of us who are actually like, hey guys, let's exercise, eat right, eat healthy, and make America healthy again, are going to be combating people who are otherwise diseased from environmental toxins, voting against the interests of those that are trying to save them. Thanks for watching this clip from the Culture War podcast. We're live every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon, so subscribe and come hang out.